welcome to Jadekind Gaming. My name is Adam. Today I'm going to do a flip through and review of the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual by Wizards of the Coast. I did the Player's Handbook last week, and I will be doing the Dungeon Master's Guide either next week or the following. I'm still reading through it currently. I'm not sure how much I'm just going to settle with a skim compared to just reading word for word. A lot of this book I did sort of skim through. It's just how I've always really used bestiaries or monster manuals or whatever. It's less of a knowing it, because ultimately, and I will say, this gives some great flavor for a lot of monsters, and at this point it's really, the ones I've read have to some extent been inspiration for the game that I've just started. But at the same time, it's one of the things where an easy stat block is great, but sometimes if I have a different thought, I am much more likely just to go with however I see the monster, not necessarily fitting their exact world, but they can certainly have inspiration, and they do within this book. So, let's check it out. First we have our lovely beholder. My first thought is that this guy is fleeing from the beholder, but I've had a friend point out it's possible that he is rallying people, saying, come on! Anyways, scary beholder. Bats and other stuff. Dwarf at the very least is... Anyway, so, checking it out. As the first thing just to point out is this book, unlike both the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide, isn't divided in... Those two are both divided into 3 parts, each with chapters within them. This one is just one big part and then the appendices at the end. For obvious reasons, it's just a bunch of monsters. However, it does begin with this introduction. First off, what is a monster? It gives examples of where they might be, although there's more of that in the Dungeon Master's Guide for like roll tables and where you'd find them. And then, of course, the different types, alignment. Essentially, it goes over all of the bits about the monsters, ending in this this really cool thing of legendary creatures. Some monsters are legendary, whether it's some of the older dragons or beholders or vampires, the Kraken, etc. They are legendary, which essentially can have one or both of these things. Legendary actions, which are actions that they can do in addition to their normal actions, like in between their opponent's turn, so in between the player's turn, they can do extra stuff. So essentially it would be monster has turn, player has turn, monster gets take an action, another player has turn, monster takes another action. So it's really like the legendary creature is beating down on the players pretty heavily. The other is they may have a lair. And a lair has 2 different things. One would be a lair action, which would be on initiative count 20. Another thing would happen, that the lair, essentially wherever they live, their environment, essentially does something, or some also have regional effects, which are is one of the things about legendary creatures that I love the most, and it is one of the things that just adds a real feel to the world. But anyways, after that, it goes right into this, and they do have, essentially, each time it gets to a new letter of the alphabet, they have, the top has that. Every creature in here, I believe, are all of the monsters. There are some of the miscellaneous creatures at the end that don't, but all the monsters have illustrations. Got a few different angels. And I'm just gonna, that said, the animated objects here, with one being animated armor, would just be what I'd sort of go over, just to sort of point out really quick what a simple monster example would be. Of, name, size, it is a construct, it is unaligned, which is typical of animals or that kind of thing, as opposed to some others which might be, like lawful good. It just doesn't have an alignment. It gives its armor class. Beside that, if it is wearing any armor, so that would be a spot where it might have equipment, that would be there. Hit points, both the average, and then if you wanted to roll them, their speed, their stats with their abilities with their modifier, damage immunities. Essentially, poison and psychic cannot damage the animated armor. Condition immunities, it cannot be blinded, charmed, deafened, exhausted, frightened, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned. It has 60-foot blind sight, but is blind beyond that distance. No languages. Challenge rating of 1 with 200 experience. It has, its special, essentially the special trait kind of things, that if in an anti-magic field, it just sort of stops working, and that when it remains still, it just looks like a suit of armor. And then it has its attack. It has a slam attack, and it has multi-attack, so it can actually make 2 melee attacks when it attacks. So it has its actions. It's really laid out very simply there, and then of course it has actually descriptive bit to it up here. So, like flavor. Really easy to read, pretty quick to reference. Of course, some of them they get longer, and with more special abilities, they can do more, but it does take a bit longer to reference. Still, pretty simple overall. And of course, there are other animated objects. Of course, get our different types of beholders. Get a couple bugbears. Centaur. Chimera. I love the crawling claw. We get a variety. Essentially, the demons section goes into pages about them, and then afterwards it goes into the stat blocks for each of those demons that it's already explained. And there are quite a few. And then the same with the devils. Goes over them and then goes over the stat blocks for each one of them. Again, with variety. Got a selection of dinosaurs. That is one thing, I guess not all of the dinosaurs are depicted in art, I don't believe. Yeah, there's a couple of those missing. So there's that. We get a couple. We get Draco Witch here, and Shadow Dragon. Each of which has essentially an example and the template to add to a dragon. So here are ways to make the template for the Draco Witch here. So here are ways to make the dragons that there already are, which there are quite a big chunk of them, to spread them out. But essentially we have dragons from, let's write this down, 87 to 118. Essentially that chunk of the book is dragons. Essentially each of the chromatic, each of the chromatic, then each of the metallic, with ancient, adult, young, and wormling versions of each dragon. A description of the dragon and of its lair with regional effects for each color and metal that there is a dragon. Right, just our metallics. But, of course they have quite a few actions. I believe the adult and ancient are both legendary, whereas the young and wormling are not. And of course after that we get the dragon turtle. Not a true dragon, but still of the dragon type. We have elementals, the 4 basic elementals, which, like, in this description area also has other things like elemental nature. It doesn't require air, food, drink, or sleep. So it doesn't need those to live. Yeah, that's a mechanical thing for a player, but it's more of a fluff thing, I guess, for a monster. But then again, they just have this lovely page with this art across the top in each of the stat blocks for the elementals. So then we get Drow, which we have a variety of Drow here. Continuing on, Fairy Dragonet, and the Flump which I just want to stop and point out. There's a few of these. There's a bunch of these little boxes in this book. There's little pieces of text alongside various creatures, you'll notice. And some of my favorites are like this one. This is Trust a Flump, X the Mystic's first rule of dungeon survival. There are, I forget how many, but there are quite a few of X the Mystic's rules of dungeon survival, and they're great fun. They're one of the things I enjoyed finding as I went through here. And I guess part of the reason for that is in this version of Flump, they, I believe, change color based on mood. So, they wouldn't be great liars. So yeah, trust them. Of course we get our genies of the different elements. Ghouls. Giants, which we have another lineup, plus a couple more of giants. A few gnolls. Deep gnome, a couple of goblins, a few different golems. We have Griffin, which I wanted to point out. They have trained mounts here. Entry on Griffin, and it goes over Griffins. Essentially, they can be trained and they will bond to one rider, and they sort of go over. You'd have to pretty much have them from an egg. And there are a few others, I believe the Pegasus, the Hippogriff, essentially with the idea of exotic or flying mounts. And they give, you know, entries for animals that could be used as mounts. Which I just think is great for them to point out as, here's a possible really cool pet, more or less, to have. But yeah. A few hags. Half-dragon template to apply probably to NPC characters in the back, but make them a half-dragon. A few different hobgoblins. We have the Kraken. And with the Kraken, I kind of wanted to go over some of the legendary stuff. First off, just to point out, they have this and they have some other aquatic monsters, which is great to have just in a base book to make sure to cover that area. But essentially, they have whatever their stat block as before, their actions, where they have a few more. Then they have legendary actions. Essentially, they get 3 actions per round, and they can do one of these things after another creature's turn, and it regains the spent actions at the start of its turn. So, for essentially expending one of its actions, it can do a tentacle attack or a fling, which are these attacks that it has up here. For 2 actions, it can use Lightning Storm, which is this ability that it has, so that would expend 2 of its 3 that it has to regain at its turn. Or for all 3, it could use Ink Cloud, and it describes what that is here. So essentially, you have extra attacks that it gets to do in between the other players, the other creature's turns. It also has a lair. The lair has actions, so essentially on initiative count 20, the Kraken takes a lair action to cause one of the following magic effects, assuming that it is encountered in its lair. It doesn't have to be, but this is if it is. Essentially, the possibilities being like a strong current moves through its lair, and each creature within 60 feet of the Kraken has to succeed a strength save, or be pushed away. It could also choose creatures within 60 feet of it, of the Kraken, have vulnerability to lightning damage until initiative count 20 on the next round, which would make its Lightning Storm probably good, or it has other options. But those are cool, and then it also has regional effects. And this is just in the area around where the Kraken's lair is, to warn the players as they're getting near it. The Kraken can alter the weather at will in a 6-mile radius centered on its lair. Water elementals coalesce within 6 miles of the lair. And aquatic creatures within 6 miles of the lair that have intelligence score of 2 or lower are charmed by the Kraken and aggressive toward intruders in the area. So fish even would just be aggressive towards people in there. So that's one of the things that's just fun. Before you even get to the monster, you have these things going on. That's just one of the things that I really liked with the layers. We have the Lycanthropes, and we actually have player characters as Lycanthropes. A box essentially for werebear, wereboar, wererat, weretiger, and werewolf. And essentially it says how things are modified if a player contracts it. And it does go over, perhaps the game master is going to take over, perhaps you'll let them play. It really depends on the campaign. But yeah. We get the methods. Dust, ice, steam, smoke, mud, and magma. And essentially these are the in-between elementals. So they made sure to have one elemental for each, essentially combined. Steam would be in between fire and probably air, maybe water. I don't know. That was a bad one. Between air and earth would be dust. Yeah, steam is fire and water, yeah. So smoke would be fire and air. Anyways, so yeah, they have those elementals too, which I enjoyed that as an option. Modrons. We got our mummies, which has both the Mummy Lord, and which has its lair and its legendary, and just the normal mummy. But even the normal mummy has essentially Rotting Fist. It has what is akin to Mummy Rot, which is essentially damage that can't be healed. I think it used to be Strength Drain. It's not that, not by any means. But what it is, essentially, you have to, if you take the damage, or if you fail the con save, you then have to have a remove curse in order to be able to heal heal any damage, and your max hit points start to drain away until the curse is removed. Also, this happens to be a page with another of X the Mystic's rules. This is the 7th rule of Dungeon Survival, and it is, before opening a sarcophagus, light a torch. They are, whatever, vulnerable to fire damage. So, yeah. Just good old advice. Ogres and half-ogres. Got our oozes, our gelatinous cube, etc. We have orcs, which it does sort of go quite a bit into their suggested flavor for orcs and orogs, war chiefs. But essentially, like quite a few of these sort of common bad guy kind of monsters, they have, they have the orc, and then, but that's whatever, a half challenge monster. But then they also have a couple that are 2 challenge rating and one that's 4, being like the war chief, the essentially orc mage, and the orog. So they have variations to combine. So essentially, if you make an army of orcs, they are not all identical clones. So that's just fun. One of the things, like they have Pseudo Dragon here, and with a few others, it's one of the ones that it suggests a variant of allowing it as a familiar option. So other than just the animals, you might have a Pseudo Dragon familiar. That could be fun. Alright, continuing on. Scarecrow's fun. Shield Guardian could be a piece of loot. They have skeletons, in addition to base skeleton here. And there, I believe, is a template in the Dungeon Master's Guide to make other things skeletons, but they also provide Minotaur and Warhorse skeletons. So you have a few variations of your skeletons. They did the same thing for zombies later on. This is sprites. The Tarasque, of course, which doesn't have its must be wished to stay dead, which I think there's like I think it's the Naga or something earlier does have that, so that's kind of sad, but oh well, there's rules for it in another creature, so I'll just add it to my Tarasque if I ever put it in. The Trent. the unicorn, which starts here. The unicorn has legendary actions, and it has a lair. Its lair has regional effects. Essentially good, some nice good things that happen. Whatever good aligned creature casts a spell or uses a magic effect that causes another good aligned creature to regain hit points, the target regains the maximum number of hit points possible for the spell or effect, etc. But it doesn't actually have lair actions, so just because it has part of it doesn't mean it has to have all. Of course, vampires. We get both our vampire and our vampire spawn. There's another of Extremistic's, his 6th rule. Keep a few gems in your pocket. A hungry Zorn is a helpful Zorn. And then our zombies. 3 of those. And then we get to our appendices. A is Miscellaneous Creatures, which is mostly animals. But it's also some other stuff. Like it's ape. But also the awakened shrub and the awakened tree. We get bat, badger, baboon, black bear, but we also get like a blink dog. Within this section, and in this one only some have art, obviously. Some pages just without it. We get a lot of animals. We get a lot of the giant stuff. Like we have the giant eagles, which is even, intelligent, has its own language, etc. It's essentially the eagles, like from The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. Yeah, we get quite a few giant creatures fall into this section, the giant animals. We also, we even get, Phase Spider is not an actual monster, it's just a creature back here. We also get our swarm of bats, or insects, or poisonous snakes, rats, etc. Wolves and such. And then, B is NPCs, so non-player characters, and these are essentially like the people. Archmage, assassin, bandit, cultist, commoner, guard, mage, knight, druid, etc. But the thing with these is they're all sort of race neutral, and the actual racial, to make them pretty much anything other than human, the actual racial traits to add to them are in a chart in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And of course our end with the index. If you can see them. Some of the pieces of art here, and there are little drawings like this in other places, but they're just sort of funny. Like we got the troll trying to find his head, and the guy, I think it's a flump that he's touching with a 10-foot pole. Or we got the Minotaur reading the map over someone's shoulder. The whatever creature that is coming up through an outhouse. So it's, got some funny art there, and some more of those drawings are in other places. Anyways, so that is the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. It does what it needs. It provides a large variety of monsters, as well as animals, NPCs, etc. for you, whatever you need, to pretty much make it easier so you don't have to custom make every enemy. You wouldn't want to do that. But yeah, big selection, beautiful art, well laid out. Most of them are... very few of them overlap of more than one monster on the same page kind of thing, which is really, which is nice for organization and flipping through and finding things quickly. But yeah, so that's the Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. I'll provide a link for you to be able to find it online. Otherwise, I'm sure you can find it at your friendly local gaming store. And have a great day. Bye.